Hi there, I'm Laci, and this is the story of how my own mother asked me to cancel my wedding, just to protect my sister's feelings. I tried to smile through it, tried to be the good daughter, but when a package arrived on my doorstep, a crumpled, forgotten wedding dress, I realized this wasn't about love at all. Why would family make you feel like a guest in your own life? Before we dive in, tell me, have you ever been made to feel invisible by the people who should love you the most? Let me know in the comments below. The sun was sinking behind the row of quiet houses when I spotted the blinking notification on my phone. Another message from Mom. I didn't open it right away. I sat there for a while, my hands wrapped around a cup of tea gone cold, staring out the window where the last burnt orange leaves clung desperately to the trees. Charleston always looked so beautiful this time of year. Fading, soft, like something about to disappear. When I finally clicked on the message, I wish I could say I was shocked. I wasn't. Laci, be a good sister. Taryn's heart is still healing. Maybe it's not the right time for a big wedding. Please think about postponing, for her sake. The words blurred as I reread them. Postpone? For her sake? After everything? I sat very still, my breath shallow. Across the room, Garrett glanced up from his laptop and smiled absently. He had no idea. None of them did. Not about the years of second place, the quiet betrayals that were too small to scream about but too sharp to forget. Taryn had been the golden one. Always. When I got a promotion, Mom would call Taryn to congratulate her on a new boyfriend. When I graduated with honors, they threw her a party for moving into a new apartment. I'd learned early not to expect applause. It was easier that way. But this was different. This was my wedding, my life, and they still thought it was theirs to rearrange. The next morning, the knock at my door startled me out of sleep. A package lay on the stoop. No return address, but I didn't need one. Inside was a dress. It wasn't white anymore. It had aged into a sad shade between beige and regret. The lace at the sleeves was frayed, the bodice sagging, like it had given up trying to hold anything together. And the smell, musty, forgotten, hit me before I even unfolded it completely. I sat on the floor with the dress pooled in my lap, the morning sun scraping across the hardwood, exposing every tired fiber of that dress. And maybe of me too. Garrett poked his head into the room, grinning. "Wow," he said. "Vintage? Sentimental, huh?" I couldn't answer. I just smiled, small, tight, and folded the dress carefully back into the box. Then I carried it into the bedroom, closed the door behind me, and leaned my forehead against the wood. Something cracked inside me, not loud, not sudden, but definite. Something had shifted, and I knew, standing there with my palms pressed against the door, that it wasn't going to shift back. The box sat abandoned in the corner of my apartment, the old dress still folded inside like a ghost I couldn't banish. Days had passed since I found the slip of paper hidden among the fabric, those 4 words carved deeper than any shout ever could: know your place. I hadn't replied to Mom's last message. I didn't have the words, and even if I did, what would be the point? They were never really listening. I thumbed through the notifications on my phone with mechanical detachment, skipping over family group chats without opening them. My chest tightened at the thought of what might be inside, but I didn't need to read it to know. There was no space for me in those conversations. It was a chilly evening, the kind where the sidewalks were slick with fallen leaves, and the air felt too sharp against your skin. I sat curled on the couch, a blanket tucked around me, when I made the mistake of opening Instagram. The photo hit me like a slap. Taryn, at the center of a long dinner table surrounded by smiling faces, plates of food half-eaten, wine glasses raised in a mid-toast, candles flickering in cozy celebration. The caption underneath read, "Healing together is the most important thing. Family first. Family first, except me." I stared at it until the screen blurred. Not one person had thought to invite me, not even out of obligation. The realization wasn't sudden. It crept up slowly, winding around my ribs like something cold and wet. There had always been moments like this. Birthday parties where I was told there wasn't enough cake left. Family vacations where I got the couch while Taryn had a bed. Christmases where my gifts came with receipts still tucked inside, as if they expected me to return them. It wasn't that they hated me. Hatred would have been easier, clearer. It was worse. They simply forgot I mattered. For a few foolish seconds, I wondered if maybe it was an oversight. Maybe my invitation had gotten lost, but deep down I knew better. The way they smiled without hesitation, the way no one had even looked guilty in the photo. They hadn't forgotten me. They had erased me. I closed Instagram with a shaky hand and stared at the ceiling, the quiet of the apartment pressing against my ears. I didn't cry. Not yet. I felt emptied out, like someone had scooped something vital out of me and left the shell behind. Later that night, I opened the wedding guest list on my laptop. The file blinked at me, waiting. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. One by one, without reading them, I deleted every message thread from my mother, my sister, even distant relatives who had clicked like on that photo. The silence that followed was deafening, but clean. Something inside me shifted again, slow but sure, like tectonic plates moving under the surface. I wasn't ready to act yet, but the ground was starting to crack. The ache from the dress and the dinner had started to dull, but it was never far. It lived under my skin, humming quietly. That afternoon, the skies hung low and gray over Charleston. The sidewalks scattered with damp leaves, and I was scrolling through my phone absent-mindedly when the photo appeared. It was Taryn who had posted it. Or maybe one of her friends? It didn't matter. There they were. Mom, Taryn, aunts, cousins, even neighbors I hadn't spoken to in years. Smiling, arms wrapped around each other. Underneath, the caption read, "Family is everything." For a moment, I actually thought my heart might stop. It wasn't just that they had forgotten me. It was that they had carefully curated a world where I had never existed. I set my phone down, face down on the coffee table, as if that would stop the sting. But it was too late. The realization seeped in, slow and cold. It was intentional. It had always been intentional. A little while later, I saw the vague posts start to creep across social media. Taryn's status read, "Some people only show up for themselves. Some families have wolves in sheep's clothing." The comments flooded in, "You deserve better. Proud of you for standing strong." Someone tagged me. Subtle, just a name slipped into the thread like an afterthought. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I knew exactly who they thought the wolf was. It didn't matter that I had said nothing. It didn't matter that I had swallowed every slight, every erasure, every wound, and stayed silent for years. They had already decided who the villain was. And in their story, it was me. I leaned back against the couch, letting my head tip against the worn fabric. I thought about every award I had hidden instead of celebrated. Every happy moment dulled down so Taryn wouldn't feel overshadowed. I thought about the years I spent believing that love meant shrinking yourself small enough to fit inside someone else's comfort. And now they were rewriting history without even blinking. They were building a bonfire out of my silence and setting it ablaze for all to see. I picked up my phone again, my thumb hovering over the new post button. I thought about writing the truth, spilling everything once and for all. I even typed it out, the lies, the manipulation, the years of being made to feel like a guest in my own family. My thumb hovered over post, but I didn't hit it. Instead, I saved it to drafts, because now, for the first time, I understood. They weren't worth the war, and I wasn't going to fight on their battlefield. I was going to build something they couldn't touch. The first notification buzzed my phone while I was heating up leftovers for dinner. At first, I thought it was just another casual comment, maybe congratulations from someone late to the party. But as I scrolled down, my stomach twisted. It was a comment under one of my old engagement photos. Not surprised. Some people just crave attention. The words stared back at me, sharp and deliberate. I scrolled further. More subtle jabs, more veiled remarks. Faces I recognized from high school, from family picnics, chiming in like they'd been waiting for this moment to brand me selfish and shallow. A familiar ache tightened in my chest, but this time, it boiled alongside humiliation. They didn't even bother hiding it anymore. My own family, my own so-called friends. I was becoming a cautionary tale in whispers and tagged comments. Later that night, as I sat on the couch pretending to watch TV, I heard Garrett's voice from the kitchen, low, careful. I muted the show and listened, heart pounding against my ribs. At first, just murmurs, then a phrase that made the blood drain from my face. Maybe it's just her being emotional. She always took things too personally. I didn't need to hear the other side to know who he was talking to. Mom. Her voice floated back, saccharine and sticky, planting seeds of doubt in the spaces where Garrett had once trusted me blindly. I gripped the blanket tighter, my knuckles white, forcing myself to breathe evenly. Garrett's responses were vague, no promises, but no defense either, just enough to make me feel like I was standing on crumbling ground. I thought about confronting him, marching into the kitchen, demanding to know why he was entertaining conversations that painted me as unstable, difficult. But then a memory surfaced. Me at 7 years old, accused of lying about a broken vase, scolded not for breaking it, but for disturbing the fragile peace of the family by speaking up. It had always been easier for them if I stayed quiet, if I swallowed my pride, my hurt, and smiled anyway. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe I was finally seeing clearly. Garrett ended the call, his footsteps padding softly toward the living room. He smiled when he saw me, easy and unbothered, like nothing was wrong. I forced a smile back, the muscles in my face aching. Inside, something braced itself. A quiet, steady voice whispering that this wasn't just about a wedding anymore. It was about not letting them strip me down to nothing. Thanksgiving came colder than I remembered. The house buzzed with fake warmth, scented candles burning too sweetly, laughter too loud, hugs too tight. Garrett and I arrived on time, arms full of side dishes no one would eat, hearts heavier than we admitted. From the moment we stepped inside, I knew. Knew by the stiff smiles, knew by the way no one reached for our coats, knew when I spotted the table. 2 folding chairs tucked at the very end of the patio, just past the sliding glass door, barely shielded from the bite of the wind, and next to the large green trash bins. Mom, in her holiday apron, gestured casually. "You two are right there. Cozy, huh?" Garrett hesitated, looking at me with something like apology flickering behind his eyes. But he said nothing. Neither did I. The main table inside gleamed with polished silverware, candles flickering golden halos over heads bent together in conversation. At our little plastic table, the wind kept threatening to blow the paper plates off. I sat there stiffly, cheeks burning against the cold and the shame. Every time I tried to join a conversation, the words would die at my lips. A few aunts would nod politely, then immediately turn back to Taryn, who glowed at the center of the main table like a sainted figure. Someone cracked a joke about not needing extra chairs next year, and laughter rippled like a current I couldn't cross. The loneliness wasn't quiet anymore. It was loud, announced, displayed. At some point, I couldn't pretend anymore. I leaned over to Garrett, trying to make my voice light. "Maybe we could move inside? There's space at the end." He shrugged without looking at me. "It's just a chair, Laci. Just a chair, just a seat by the trash, just a lifetime of being the afterthought." I didn't argue. I didn't have it in me. When dessert was served, I excused myself. No one noticed. Not really. Garrett stayed, laughing awkwardly at a story about Taryn's strength and resilience. I stepped outside into the cold night air, pulling my shawl tight around my shoulders. The stars were hidden behind thick clouds, the kind that promised rain without delivering it, just a lingering, heavy threat in the sky. I stood there for a long time, letting the cold seep in until it numbed even the burning in my chest. Inside, laughter and clinking glasses echoed faintly, muffled by the glass doors and the growing distance. And for the first time, I realized, truly realized, I was already alone, even with him standing right beside me. The next family gathering was supposed to be casual, an impromptu Sunday brunch to bring everyone together, Mom had said. The sky was gray, heavy with winter's weight, and I felt it settle over my shoulders as Garrett and I walked up the familiar front steps. Inside, the house was decorated for Christmas too early, twinkling lights strung carelessly across the mantel, masking the chill that had nothing to do with the weather. We moved through the living room, polite smiles frozen on our faces, until I saw it. The folding table again. Near the trash cans. Again. Garrett said nothing. I said nothing. We found our seats just as the noise of children laughing filled the room. One of my young cousins, a child too small to know better but old enough to parrot what he heard, pointed at my chair and giggled loudly. "That's where the unimportant people sit." A wave of silence swept over the adults. No one corrected him. No one laughed it off. No one looked at me. Except Mom, who stood by the coffee machine, stirring sugar into her cup, smiling that tight, empty smile she wore when things were going exactly as she planned. Garrett shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his gaze carefully avoiding mine. I felt the blood pounding in my ears, the hot flush of shame rising up my neck. But I didn't move. I sat there, still, letting it burn into me, because now I knew. This wasn't carelessness, it wasn't accident. It was deliberate, and everyone was complicit. Later, as the brunch wound down, Noelle caught me near the hallway, her hand trembling slightly as she tugged at my sleeve. "Can we talk?" she whispered, guilt heavy in her voice. We stepped into the quiet of the laundry room, the hum of the dryer muffling the rest of the house. Noelle's words spilled out in a rush. How, months ago, Mom and Taryn had floated the idea of scaling back my wedding. How they had talked about making it less of a spectacle to help Taryn heal. How the family had agreed, not maliciously, Noelle insisted, but because it just seemed easier. Easier to erase me, to trim me down like a bad hedge. I listened without interrupting, the words washing over me like cold rain. I thought about every time I dimmed my joy to protect someone else's pride, every time I bit my tongue to keep the peace. A strange kind of calm settled over me. Not numbness, not anger, just clarity. I owed them nothing, not my patience, not my understanding, not my silence. Later that night, back at home, I wrapped my hands around a coffee mug so tightly it burned my palms. I stared out the window into the dark, the glass reflecting a woman I was just starting to recognize. "Never again," I whispered to my own reflection. And this time, it wasn't a plea. It was a vow. The coffee shop smelled like burnt beans and cinnamon, a scent I usually loved but now found cloying. Noelle sat across from me, fiddling with her paper cup, her knuckles white. She didn't meet my eyes at first. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Laci, there's something I should have told you a long time ago." The words tumbled out in a rush. How months ago, Mom had asked her to help convince me to postpone the wedding. "For Taryn's sake," Noelle said bitterly, staring into her untouched latte. "To keep peace in the family, to make it easier." Noelle hadn't agreed, but she hadn't warned me either. "Fear," she admitted. "Fear of becoming the next one pushed to the outside." I sat there, feeling the walls of the coffee shop press inward, the noise of steaming milk and grinding espresso machines fading to a dull hum. It was never about protecting Taryn's feelings. It was about shrinking me down to something manageable. I thanked Noelle, my voice steady somehow, and left without finishing my drink. The December wind outside cut sharper than the coffee ever could. That night, Garrett and I sat in the living room, a Christmas movie playing muted on the TV. The tree twinkled half-heartedly in the corner, ornaments catching the flicker of light without offering any warmth. He cleared his throat, fiddling with the hem of his sweater. "I've been thinking," he said carefully. Maybe we should consider delaying the wedding." The words hit like ice water. I didn't move, didn't breathe. He rushed to fill the silence. "It's just, with everything going on, your mom, Taryn. I mean, family harmony is important, right? We don't want to cause more hurt." Family harmony, not our happiness, not our future, just more sacrifices, more trimming pieces of myself to fit their comfort. I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized he wasn't standing beside me. He was standing beside them. I excused myself quietly and went into the bedroom. The engagement ring felt heavier than usual as I slipped it off my finger. I placed it gently in the small wooden box on my dresser, the one Mom had given me for keepsakes when I was 10, when she still pretended I was precious. I didn't cry, not anymore. In my heart, something loud and final settled. The next apology would not be mine to make. It never should have been. The apartment was colder than usual, the draft slipping under the door, carrying the bitterness of December inside. Garrett sat across from me, his hands clasped tightly between his knees. His eyes were cautious, like he was bracing for a fight he didn't really want to have. "I just think," he started, voice measured, "if you really loved your family, you'd understand why this wedding. Maybe it's not the right time." I stared at him. Not the words, the spaces between them. He wasn't asking, he was folding. Another crack opened in the ground between us. I didn't bother responding. There was nothing left to say. 2 days later, the family gathered for what Mom called a holiday healing brunch. The house buzzed with false cheer. Garland wrapped the staircase, and Taryn sat at the center of it all, her eyes bright with unshed tears. They were ready for the performance. It didn't take long. Between sips of cider and clinks of forks against plates, Taryn launched into her story. The pain, the betrayal, the cruelty she had endured. Hinted, of course, but pointed sharply enough that even the densest cousin could see who the villain was meant to be. My name was never spoken, but it hung heavy in every glance, every murmured word. Garrett sat silently by the fireplace, refusing to meet my gaze. The whispers grew thicker, like smoke filling a room with no windows. And then, the coup de grace. Taryn's shoulders shook. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She covered her face with delicate hands, sobbing. I just wish my sister cared about me at all," she choked out. Heads turned toward me, waiting, judging. I sat frozen in my chair, 1,000 moments of swallowed pain clawing at my throat. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. An aunt shook her head in disappointment. No one said the words, but I heard them anyway. Apologize, beg, shrink. I stood up, slowly, carefully, the scrape of the chair legs against the floor louder than the murmurs. I said nothing. I walked past them, Mom's narrowed eyes, Garrett's downturned gaze, Taryn's quivering shoulders. I didn't slam the door. I didn't make a scene. I drove home in silence, the city lights blurring past. When I reached my apartment, I sat at the kitchen table, pulled out my laptop, and opened the wedding guest list. Without hesitation, I deleted Carla's name, Taryn's, Garrett's. Then I composed a short, formal email. Due to recent circumstances, we are making adjustments to the wedding guest list. Thank you for your understanding. No rage, no begging. Just clarity, clean and cold, like the air outside and the new life waiting on the other side of this final door. The morning after the email, my apartment was wrapped in a strange, heavy silence. I half expected my phone to explode with missed calls, angry texts, emotional pleas. But it stayed still. There was no apology, no outrage, just nothing. The absence was its own answer. I stood by the window, watching the city slowly stretch awake under a sky the color of cold steel. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I owed anyone a response. The space where their noise used to live was now filled with something unfamiliar but welcome: peace. The wedding day came quietly, no grand halls or choreographed seating charts, just a sunlit clearing at the edge of a small park, dusted with the faintest whisper of frost. No velvet aisle runners, no towering flower arrangements, just friends, real ones, clustered close, their breaths misting in the air, their smiles real and wide. No parent sitting in judgmental silence. No sister casting long shadows from the second row. No Garrett shifting guiltily beside me. Only Noelle, standing by my side, handing me a bouquet of winter daisies. Only the faces that mattered. The ones who had stayed without expectation or performance. When I said my vows, it wasn't to anyone standing across from me. It was to myself. A vow to never again make myself small for someone else's comfort. A vow to never again chase a family that treated love like a currency I hadn't earned. Later, when the guests had drifted home and the sky stretched into velvet, I found myself standing by the river. The holiday lights blinked across the city, tiny beacons in the gathering dark. I watched them flicker, their reflections dancing on the water, and thought about everything I had let go. Carla, Taryn, Garrett, all the versions of myself that had begged to be chosen, all the moments I had bent backward trying to be good enough. Gone now, swept downstream like autumn leaves no one bothered to catch. I thought briefly of whether they missed me, whether Mom's house felt a little emptier, whether Taryn's stories sounded hollow now without a villain to blame. But I didn't linger on it. Some questions don't need answers. I pulled my shawl tighter around my shoulders, feeling the weight of the night settle against me. But it was a different kind of weight now, not burden, foundation. I don't need their approval to live a beautiful life, I whispered to the river, to the cold air, to the girl I used to be. And then I turned toward the city lights, each step lighter than the one before. Life has a way of teaching us that not everyone we lose is a real loss. Through this journey, I learned that sometimes you have to walk away, not out of anger, but out of love for yourself. Family is supposed to be about unconditional support, not conditional love based on how much you're willing to shrink yourself. I used to think standing alone meant failure. Now I know it means freedom. What about you? Have you ever had to choose yourself over what others expected? I would love to hear your story in the comments. If you feel this video touched your heart, leave a 1 inch in the comments or let me know where you're watching from. And if you didn't connect with it, tell me why. I welcome every perspective. Don't forget to subscribe so you can join me on the next story. Let's keep walking this road together.